Hi everyone and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. This week we are working on a stitch tutorial, and this will be great for those of you that want to experiment with your own projects, but you're wondering what stitch you should use. Well, the Primrose stitch is just such a pretty stitch. It's great if you want to work on blankets or scarves, hats, I mean pretty much anything. It can be a little bit on the lacy side, as you can see. And it has a slightly different texture on one side than it does the other. So this is a 2-row repeat pattern. And so for the even numbered rows, we've got shell stitches. And for the odd numbered rows, we've got the sprig stitch, which consists of a single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet. And for those of you, if you've missed that tutorial, we have a tutorial on the sprig stitch, as well as a project that we created using that stitch as well. I'll leave those links for you in the description box down below. But that's really what this stitch is made up of. It's the sprig stitch in the first row and the shell stitch in the second row. So like I said, this is the front of the shell stitch row. So the pattern looks like that, or the texture I should say. And now when I turn it over to the back of the shell stitch row, now you've got what traditionally is known as the Primrose stitch side. So this would be the right side, I guess you could say. And it just creates these really pretty little arched details there, and I just love it. So you see, it can be a little lacy, but it can also be super, super cozy. So if you know how to single crochet, chain stitch, and double crochet, you're pretty much good to go. Okay, there's 1/2 double crochet in there, but this is created using your basic crochet stitches. So let's just dive in. I'm going to take you through step by step how to crochet the Primrose stitch. Okay, so for today's quick tutorial, we're going to use some of this leftover yarn. This is Bernat Premium yarn, and I believe it's just called Purple, and it's a medium 4-weight yarn. I know it's a little bit darker, but I think it'll be okay on camera. And for this, I'm just going to be using a 6mm hook, which is also known as a J or a size 10. It is a little bit larger hook than probably recommended. They usually recommend like a 5 or a 5.5, but I like this yarn to sit a little bit more relaxed, and I think it'll help you guys to see the stitch a little bit easier. And for any project in general, just make sure you always have a pair of scissors and a yarn needle to sew in your ends at the end. So let's get started on the Primrose stitch. So to begin, we are going to place a slip knot on our hook. And you want to chain up an initial foundation chain row in multiples of 3 plus 2 more at the end. So whatever project you're working on, maybe a scarf or a blanket, you're just going to stitch up in sets of 3 as long as you like it. And once you have that length, you will add an additional 2 stitches at the end. So I'm going to do a total of 21 stitches. That's my multiple of 3. Then I'm going to add 2 more at the end to give me 23 stitches. So here I go. 1, 2, 3, 22, and 23. So I've got 21 stitches. They're my multiples of 3. Then I added another 2 on the end for turning. So just make sure that your chain is not twisted and that it's sitting nice and even. Okay, didn't chain too tightly. So we're going to begin row 1 of our 2-row repeat. So what you want to do now is you want to find the 3rd chain from the hook. We never count the loop that's on the hook. So we have 1, 2, and into the 3rd one, we're going to place a single crochet stitch. So you're just going to insert and place a single crochet. You're then going to chain 2. And then back into that same stitch or that same chain, we're going to place a single crochet. And this is what we're going to do all the way down for row number 1. So you just have what looks like a little cluster. Don't worry that that chain is getting stretched out. It will all work out in the end. So now what we're going to do is we're going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and into the 3rd one, we're going to do the same thing. You're going to insert your hook, oops, single crochet, you will chain 2, and then going back into that same stitch, you're going to single crochet. So you will then continue on down the row. You will always skip 2, 1 and 2, and into the third chain, you will place a single crochet. Chain 2, and then single crochet back into the same stitch, okay? So keep doing that all the way down, and I will meet up with you. You should have 2 stitches left at the end. I'll meet up with you there. Okay, so I've come up to the end of row 1. I've got 2 stitches left. My work is looking like this. So you can see that the stitch is stretched out a little bit where we placed all of those single crochets, and that's totally okay. And now into the very last stitch, so we're going to skip that next one. Into the last stitch, we're going to place a half double crochet stitch. So just into that stitch there, half double crochet. So your row here will be flanked by a half double crochet and or a chain 2. So we did a chain 2 at the beginning. So row 1 is complete, and we are now going to move on to row 2. So for row 2, we are going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. You'll turn your work. And now we are going to work into those chain 2 spaces. So remember we did single crochet, chain 2, single crochet. Now that creates a little space there. We are going to work a shell stitch into that space. So a shell consists of 3 double crochets in a cluster. So there's 1. Back into that same space, we create the second one. And then back into that space one more time, we create the third one. Okay, so there we have it. So you've got your chain 3, which counts as a double crochet, and then into that chain 2 space, we placed a shell stitch. And that is actually what creates the primrose, is having the shell stitch sit on top of the sprig stitch. So let's do that again. You're going to find your next chain 2. See how these chain 2s create these little peaks here? So be careful not to go into the stitch. In this first row, because we worked into chains, it's easy to confuse the fact and go into here, but what we want to do is go into there. That's the actual chain 2 space. So 3 double crochets into that space. So we have 1. See how you can see the difference? This is the chain, that is the chain 2 space, and that is where we want to go into. And there's 2, and then there is 3. Okay? And you're just going to repeat that into the top of every chain 2 peak until you get to the last peak. And I will meet you at the end of row number 2. So it's pretty straightforward. Just find those chain 2 spaces and place your shell stitch. And pretty straightforward. Okay, so I finished my second row. So I've just done the last shell into the last chain 2 space. And some people might think that we are done, but we are not. So remember we had the chain 3 at the beginning of the row? Well, we've got to have a double crochet at the end. See how there's a little dip in? We have that chain 2, that little turnaround chain here. Okay, so we are going to place a double crochet into the top of that chain 2. That was our turning chain. Okay, just right there. And you're going to double crochet. And this is what flanks the end of all of your even rows. So see, we have chain 3, which counts as a double crochet on this end. And then we end with a double crochet on that end. So it's nice and even. So that is the primrose stitch. And actually, this is what makes it look really pretty. This is the back of the shell stitch and the front of the sprig stitch. And that is what makes it, for me, look so, so pretty. So that is the primrose stitch. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start you off on the next row because row 1 was worked into the chain, right? So now we're going to work into row 3, which is going to be more what you're going to repeat in future rows. So you're basically going to repeat row 1 and row 2. So in row 3, I'm repeating row 1. So I'm going to chain 2 and I'm going to turn my work here. Okay. And then what I want to do is I'm going to skip this stitch here that I just chained from, the next stitch, and into the third stitch, I'm going to place my single crochet. So we're going to go back into doing the sprig stitch. Okay, see that? So this is the stitch. So 1, 2, and 3, we insert there, single crochet, chain 2, 1 and 2, and then single crochet back into that same stitch, just like we did before. Now we actually have stitches to work into as opposed to the chain. See that? So it just has a little bit more sustenance. And so we're going to repeat that. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and into the third stitch, we're going to place that single crochet, chain 2, and then single crochet again. And you'll notice that every time you skip 2, you end up placing that stitch basically in the middle stitch of your shell. So these sprig stitches are sitting nice and centered over your shell stitches. So I'm just trying to stretch it out so you can see. So really, when we look at it like this, it kind of can look like a bit of a jimble jamble, but the thing with this stitch, and I know it's a little bit of a darker yarn too, the thing with this stitch is once you work up subsequent rows, it's the overall texture that this stitch creates. It's so, so pretty. So go ahead and do this to the end of row 3. I'll start you a little bit on row 4, and then I will work up the rest of the swatch just so you can see the effect that I'm talking about. But I'm going to go ahead and finish row number 3 here. I'm going to skip 1, 2, and 3 into that third one. I'm going to single crochet, chain 2, and single crochet back into the same stitch. And I'll see you at the end of row 3. Okay, so at the end of row 3, you've got 2 stitches left, just like in row 1. So you have the top of this double crochet here, and then you have the top of the chain 3. So remember that chain 3 counts as a double crochet. So we're going to skip this double crochet stitch, and into the top of the chain 3, we're going to place a half double crochet stitch. So anytime you're working on the odd numbered rows, you are flanking them with a half double crochet, because remember that chain 2 at the beginning counts as a half double, and a half double at the end. When you're working on your even rows, like the shell stitch rows, you will always have a chain 3 and a double crochet at the end. See how that's already coming up with a really cool effect? Okay, so let's go. I'll just start you on row 4. So we're now going to repeat row number 2, and that's the shell stitch row. So we're going to chain 3. We're going to turn our work. And again, what you want to do here is find those chain 2 spaces. And they're kind of easy to see because they create that little peak there. So don't be afraid to stretch that out. And now you've got something you can really work into. So I'm just going to place a shell stitch inside that space. And that consists of 3 double crochets. Just like that. Okay, so if I stretch that out, you can really see where the chain 2 space is and where the shells are. And that's pretty much it for the primrose stitch. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and work up several more rows so that you can really get the full effect of the general texture of this stitch. Okay, so I have completed a total of 8 rows or 4 repeats of the pattern. And so you can see the stitch is looking like that. So do you see what I mean about the general texture. It just looks so sweet. Really pretty for baby blankets, scarves, even hats and things like that. So it's a great stitch to use. You can make cozy projects with like a medium 4 or a bulky weight yarn. Or you can make something a little bit more lacy with a light weight number 2 or a fine weight number 1 yarn. It really is pretty. It's technically reversible, but I would say it's got a slightly different texture. So this is the front of the shells, and that is the back. So see how the back creates that pretty little kind of arched shape? That's for me what really makes the primrose shape. So there you have it. I hope you found it pretty easy, and I'll be curious to find out what you're going to use your primrose stitch for. So make sure to let me know in the comments down below what you're going to use this stitch for. And if you have any other questions, make sure to also leave those for me in the comment box down below. Or as always, you can reach me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. And don't forget, come visit me on the website at crochetcrafty.com and sign up for my monthly newsletter. I give away a free written pattern every month just for saying thanks for coming and hanging out with me. As always, you can check out the Etsy store, Crochet Crafty Canada, for more written patterns if you're interested and you'd like to continue to supporting the stitch sessions here on YouTube. Make sure to press that subscribe button if you're new here and if you enjoyed this tutorial. If you like this type of project, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and that way I'll know to keep making more stitch tutorials for you in the future. Thank you as always to everybody that continues to support the channel by commenting, liking, subscribing, donating with the thanks button. I so appreciate all of you here. And as always, you can say hi to me. I'm on the socials at Instagram and Facebook at The Stitch Sessions. So there you have it for this week's tutorial. I hope you have an amazing week. Happy crocheting. Take good care of yourselves as always. And I will see you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.